Past quest stories. She stood before the judge like a statue carved from winter stone. My father, Walter, didn't even hesitate. He looked straight into the eyes of the law and painted me as broken, dangerous, delusional. A trembling hand dabbed at eyes that held no tears. A practiced sigh. A glance back at the row of relatives he'd dragged in as his personal audience, ready to witness the public execution of my dignity. "Your Honor," he said, voice thick with rehearsed grief, "my daughter is mentally unfit. She is erratic, confused, a clear and present danger to herself and to the family legacy." The courtroom smelled of old wood, cheap perfume, and betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I simply lifted my wrist, glanced at the thin silver watch I'd bought myself 2 years earlier with money he never knew I had, and counted silently. 3 minutes. That was all the time he had left before the universe he'd constructed around his lies came crashing down on top of him. Have you ever had someone who was supposed to protect you look you dead in the eye and sell you like yesterday's trash just to save their own skin? If you know that particular flavor of hell, drop a yes below. I want to know how many of us are still standing after they tried to bury us alive. Walter sat back down, smoothed his tie like a man who just delivered the eulogy at his own daughter's funeral. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick, expectant. Every aunt, every cousin, every second cousin once removed was waiting for the meltdown they'd been promised. Waiting for Roddy, the family disappointment, the quiet failure, the 29-year-old child who still needed saving, to shatter. I gave them nothing. I breathed slowly, deliberately, letting the silence grow teeth, letting it crawl under their skin until even the judge shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Roddy," Judge Morrison finally said, peering over the top of her glasses, "your father has made extremely serious allegations regarding your mental competence and your management of the estate. Do you wish to respond?" Walter leaned forward like a wolf, scenting fresh blood. He wanted the explosion. Needed it. Craved the proof that I was exactly the hysterical mess he described. So I became the opposite. I rose slowly, smoothed the lapels of my charcoal blazer, the one he'd once called thrift store trash. I didn't glance at the gallery. I didn't rush. I locked eyes with him and let my face go completely blank. No anger, no fear, no pain. Just gray. They call it gray rock. You become boring, unreactive, a wall. You starve the narcissist of the emotional oxygen they live on. But I wasn't gray because I was broken. I was gray because I was hunting. "Your Honor," I said, voice low, steady, almost soft. "I'm listening. I'm simply allowing my father to finish his presentation. I wouldn't dream of interrupting such a carefully rehearsed performance." A muscle twitched in Walter's jaw. His smirk cracked, just for a heartbeat. Stephen, his lawyer, stopped tapping his pen. Sweat glistened along his hairline. He knew. He knew the trail of paper they'd left behind. He knew which signatures were forged, which timestamps had been altered. He knew I'd been watching longer than they'd been lying. Walter recovered quickly. He launched into the list like a prosecutor reading charges. "Look at her life, Your Honor. She lives in a 300-square-foot cage in the worst neighborhood she could find, wears clothes from clearance bins, rides the bus because she can't even afford a car. Every opportunity I handed her, she squandered." He was painting poverty. I was remembering choices. 2 years earlier, he'd shown up uninvited at my tiny studio. Looked around with disgust so thick I could taste it. Then drove away in a brand new Porsche Cayenne, leased in my name, using my credit, my social security number. He thought I was poor. I was positioning. While he bought $6,000 suits to impress people who laughed behind his back, I quietly built a $17 million portfolio. While he mocked my data entry slave job, I was the shadow partner in 3 private equity funds. While he sneered at my shoebox apartment, I was acquiring the distressed mortgage on his beloved country club membership. While he laughed at my blazer, I closed on the shell company that held the lien on his downtown office tower. He saw a broken daughter. I saw an insolvent parasite. "She has no grasp of financial responsibility," he bellowed, slamming his palm on the table so hard the water glasses jumped. She let $750,000 vanish from grandmother's trust, and she didn't even notice. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Pearls were clutched. Eyes widened in delicious horror. Walter turned to them, his choir. My daughter is so far gone, so mentally detached, that a thief could bleed her dry and she wouldn't lift a finger. If we don't act now, she'll be homeless in months. Then came the climax he'd been saving. Stephen rose, legs unsteady, and handed the judge a thick stack of bank statements. These records show massive unauthorized transfers, he said, voice cracking. 50,000, 80,000, 120, all to untraceable shell companies, no fraud reports, no alerts, nothing. Walter couldn't contain himself. She's so incompetent she didn't even realize she was being robbed blind. Judge Morrison flipped pages slowly. Her face gave nothing away. Then she looked at me. Miss Roddy, these numbers are staggering. Do you have any explanation? The room held its breath. Walter crossed his arms. Smug. Certain. I stood once more. Picked up one slim blue folder. Walked to the bench with the calm of someone who already knows the final scene. I don't have an explanation, Your Honor, I said clearly. I have proof. I laid the folder down. I have the map. Judge Morrison opened it. Her eyebrows lifted. The first page wasn't numbers. It was a visual heat map of IP addresses. Every single transfer traced back to one machine. One location. 442 Oakwood Drive. His study. Walter's face turned the color of spoiled milk. I kept going. And here, I pointed to the next page, are the wire receipts. Notice the recipient, Apex Consulting, incorporated 3 years ago using the maiden name of your longtime companion, Vanessa Reed. The gallery detonated. Aunts gasped like they'd been slapped. Cousins stared at Walter as though seeing him for the first time. He tried to shout. That's fabricated, she hacked. I cut through him like glass through silk. I didn't stop him at 50,000, Your Honor, because 50,000 is a family squabble, a civil annoyance. He'd pay a fine, get probation, and be back in 6 months with a new story. I turned fully toward him now. Let him feel every word like a blade. I waited until he crossed 500,000. Until the money crossed state lines. Until the pattern became organized, repeated, interstate wire fraud. Until it qualified for RICO. I leaned in slightly. The mandatory minimum is 10 years. Federal prison. No parole. No early release. Walter collapsed inward. A king reduced to ash. I wasn't finished. I didn't lose $750,000, Father. My voice dropped to something cold and final. I spent it. That was the price of your cage. And honestly, it was cheap. He lunged for one last weapon. A yellowed authorization form he claimed I'd signed 2 years earlier. She authorized it, he crowed. She's just too far gone to remember. Judge Morrison studied the signature. Asked me. I nodded once. It looks like my signature. Because it is. He started to smile until I placed the second folder down. That single page gave you access to one account, I said. It did not give you immunity from consequences. I slid the documents forward. Effective this morning. I own your office building. You're 3 months behind on rent. Eviction notice served at 7:14 a.m. I own the note on your house. I own your lines of credit. I own your debt. I placed the final sheet in front of him. Sign the confession and the 30-day vacate agreement. Refuse, and the marshals change the locks by lunch. He stared at the paper as though it were a guillotine. Then the doors burst open. Federal marshals. U.S. attorney. Handcuffs glinting under fluorescent light. Walter didn't fight. He didn't beg. He simply folded. They let him out in silence. No one spoke for him. Not one relative stood. Not one voice called his name. Outside the courthouse, the January air tasted clean. I deleted his number. Finalized the sale of his house. Kept walking. Because peace isn't something you're given. Peace is something you take. After you let them dig their own grave. Deep enough to bury them forever.